Today I invite you to explore a force so powerful, yet so often overlooked, that it quietly scripts every triumph and failure in our lives. That force is the imagination, not as a child's daydream, but as the hidden language of success. The world you see around you is not built by bricks and steel first, but by thoughts and visions. Every invention, every empire, every personal victory, each began as an inner picture. Imagination is reality in motion, the unseen blueprint of what is to come. But imagination alone is not enough. The key lies in feeling. When we emotionally accept an idea, when we feel it as though it were already true, it begins to breathe with life. Feeling is the secret language that instructs the mind and body to act as if success were already ours. Imagination is often dismissed as a fleeting daydream, a playful escape from reality, or something only children indulge in. Yet, beneath its apparent simplicity lies one of the most powerful forces available to the human spirit. To understand imagination fully, we must recognize it as more than idle fantasy. Imagination is reality in motion. It is not just a picture inside the mind, it is the silent architect of the visible world, the unseen seed from which every manifestation grows. Every object you touch, every invention you use, every structure that shapes your environment began first as an inner conception. The device in your hand was once a vision in the mind of an innovator. The buildings that line a city skyline were once silent drawings etched into the imagination of an architect. Even the social systems, businesses, and movements that govern human life originated not as tangible realities, but as formless ideas clothed in thought. In this sense, imagination is not separate from reality. It is reality at its earliest, most formative stage. Consider a painter. Before a brush ever meets the canvas, the painting exists in the artist's inner world. It may begin as a vague sense, a flash of color, or a composition half seen in the mind's eye. Yet by dwelling on it, shaping it inwardly, the artist brings it forward into expression. The canvas is merely the final step. Likewise, all human progress follows this pattern: first the conception, then the creation. What begins unseen eventually steps into visibility. Imagination, therefore, is not a retreat from reality, it is reality itself unfolding in motion. To treat imagination lightly is to misunderstand its role in shaping our lives. Thoughts are not passive. They carry within them the power to shape perception, guide behavior, and ultimately sculpt destiny. What you imagine repeatedly, especially with conviction and emotion, becomes a living force. Your imagination plants seeds in the subconscious mind, and the subconscious does not distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically experienced. It takes both as reality, and from this soil, your outer circumstances grow. History offers countless examples of this truth. The Wright brothers saw flight long before a machine ever left the ground. To others, their dream was impossible, a mere fantasy. Yet in their imagination, it was already real. They lived with that inner picture until the external world conformed. Similarly, visionaries like Nikola Tesla spoke of ideas arriving as fully formed images within their minds, so detailed that they could construct machines directly from imagination. What skeptics called dreaming, they understood as the earliest phase of reality in motion. But imagination is not reserved for inventors or great thinkers. It is at work in each of us every day. When you anticipate a conversation, when you picture a goal, when you replay a memory, these are acts of imagination. Each moment, you are rehearsing inner realities that, if repeated and felt deeply enough, will shape your future. Many fail to see this because the translation from imagination to physical reality often carries a delay. Like a seed buried in the earth, the results are not visible immediately, but growth is happening nonetheless. This is why the quality of our imagination matters profoundly. A mind filled with fear, doubt, and limitation will inevitably project these states into the outer world. To dwell habitually on failure is to unconsciously set in motion the conditions that bring failure about. Conversely, to hold within one's imagination visions of success, harmony, and fulfillment is to invite these very realities to emerge. The imagination is impartial. It reflects what it is given, whether noble or destructive. The responsibility then lies in choosing carefully the images we nurture. Science, too, has begun to recognize the practical influence of imagination. Athletes employ visualization techniques to improve performance, finding that mental rehearsal activates the same neural pathways as physical practice. In medicine, patients who visualize healing often recover faster, as the mind communicates powerful instructions to the body. These findings echo an ancient truth: imagination is not a mere byproduct of consciousness. It is a directive force within it. Yet imagination alone is not enough. For it to become effective reality in motion, it must be accompanied by belief and feeling. To merely think of success casually is to scatter seeds on barren soil. But to imagine with conviction, To feel as though the envisioned reality were already true is to water the seed to quicken its growth. This is why some people appear to manifest their desires with ease while others struggle. The difference lies not in the strength of their imagination, but in the depth of their belief in what they imagine. Imagination, therefore, is not passive entertainment, but active creation. Every moment we are imagining something, whether consciously or unconsciously. The challenge is to seize control of this process, to become deliberate rather than accidental creators. Instead of letting imagination drift aimlessly toward worry or regret, we can direct it toward constructive visions. By doing so, we align our inner world with the realities we wish to see expressed outwardly. When understood in this way, imagination ceases to be a private fantasy and becomes a universal law of creation. It is reality in motion, reality at its invisible stage. To ignore it is to surrender the authorship of our lives to chance. To embrace it is to realize that we are, in truth, the architects of our own destiny, wielding a power that has always been with us, shaping quietly, creating ceaselessly. Moving from the unseen into the seen as feeling is the secret. The human mind is a powerful instrument. Yet thought alone does not transform life. We think countless thoughts each day, yet only a fraction of them shape our destiny. What makes the difference is not the thought itself, but the emotional charge behind it. Feeling is the secret. It is feeling that breathes life into thought, that stamps it with conviction, that transforms an idle idea into a creative force. What we emotionally accept as true becomes the seed of manifestation, for the subconscious responds not to abstract logic, but to the vibrancy of emotion. Think of a gardener planting seeds. The type of seed determines the harvest, but it is the soil that allows the seed to grow. In the same way, imagination plants the seed, but feeling provides the fertile ground that determines whether the seed takes root. A fleeting thought without emotional acceptance soon withers away. But a thought impressed with deep feeling penetrates the subconscious and begins to shape experience. Feeling is the language the subconscious understands, and whatever is impressed upon it with emotion becomes reality in due time. This is why people often find that their fears come true more quickly than their casual hopes. Fear is not a mere thought, it is a thought charged with powerful emotion. It is felt deeply, rehearsed inwardly, and accepted as possible, sometimes even inevitable. By entertaining fear with strong feeling, one unwittingly plants its seed. In the same way, when joy, gratitude, or confidence is felt sincerely and consistently, those feelings give life to the visions they accompany. The subconscious does not discriminate between good or bad, wanted or unwanted. It simply responds to the depth of feeling attached to an idea. To understand the secret of feeling, we must look closely at how it operates in daily life. Imagine someone striving for success while inwardly dwelling in feelings of inadequacy. They may think positive thoughts, repeat affirmations, or even take action, yet if deep down they feel unworthy, that feeling undermines the effort. The subconscious accepts their emotional state as truth and arranges life accordingly. By contrast, another person who genuinely feels deserving of success, even if circumstances are against them, eventually finds the world bending in their favor. The distinction lies not in surface thinking, but in the emotional core of belief. Feeling, then, is not optional, it is the bridge between imagination and reality. Thoughts are the blueprint, but feeling is the electricity that animates the design. Without feeling, thoughts remain lifeless sketches. With feeling, they gain momentum, direction, and substance. This explains why rituals of visualization, prayer, or affirmation only work when infused with genuine emotion. Merely repeating words or seeing images in the mind does little, but to feel the end result as though it were already accomplished. That is the alchemy of transformation. Examples abound in everyday life. Athletes who not only visualize victory, but also feel the thrill of crossing the finish line often perform at extraordinary levels. Artists who pour emotion into their creations find that their work resonates more deeply with others. Entrepreneurs who feel the success of their ventures in advance move with a confidence that attracts opportunities. In each case, it is not thought alone that produces results, but thought fused with feeling, creating an irresistible inner certainty that life responds to. Feeling also explains the power of gratitude. When one feels grateful for something not yet seen, it signals to the subconscious that the desired reality already exists. Gratitude is not a mere polite thought, it is an emotional acceptance, a living acknowledgement that what is imagined is already real. This inner acceptance accelerates its appearance in the external world. The same principle applies to love, joy, or peace. When these feelings saturate the mind, they call forth circumstances that mirror them. Yet many struggle with this principle because they confuse surface emotions with deep inner acceptance. To say, I feel rich, while inwardly sensing lack is to deceive oneself. The subconscious does not respond to empty declarations, it responds to genuine states of being. This is why cultivating feeling often requires more than words. It requires imagination. By vividly imagining a scene that implies fulfillment and entering into the feeling of it as though it were happening now, one can impress the subconscious with the emotional reality of success. This is not pretense, it is training the inner world to accept as true what is desired. It is also important to see that feeling does not mean intense excitement alone. The most powerful feelings are often quiet and steady. The calm assurance of knowing, the peaceful acceptance that something is already so. These carry more creative power than frantic attempts to force belief. Just as a seed grows best in steady, fertile soil rather than in restless disturbance, so too do our desires flourish when we hold them with calm conviction rather than desperate striving. Feeling is the secret because it is the medium through which belief is conveyed to the subconscious. Belief is not measured by words, but by the emotional certainty behind them. One can say, I am successful, 1,000 times, but if the feeling of success is absent, the statement carries no creative force. On the other hand, a single moment of deep, genuine feeling of success can accomplish more than countless empty affirmations. This is why moments of imagination that stir the heart are so vital. They impress the subconscious with living conviction. Ultimately, the hidden power of feeling lies in its ability to align inner reality with outer expression. When we emotionally accept something as true, even if the senses deny it, we set into motion the unseen currents that shape events, relationships, and opportunities. Life reflects back to us not what we casually wish for, but what we deeply feel to be real. This is the essence of creation. The reason why feeling stands as the secret that unlocks the door between vision and manifestation alive in the end. The principle of living in the end is one of the most transformative truths about success and creation. It teaches that success does not come from constantly striving, worrying, or waiting for a better future to arrive. Rather, success comes when we mentally and emotionally dwell in the state of our fulfilled desire. To live in the end means to assume, within the imagination and feelings, that the goal has already been achieved. It is to think, feel, and act from the perspective of completion, not from the perspective of longing. This shift in awareness is what bridges the gap between desire and realization. Most people approach their desires from the standpoint of lack. They say, I want this, or one day I will have that. But such statements imply separation. They reinforce the belief that the desired outcome exists in the distant future, not in the present moment. When the mind dwells in lack, the subconscious accepts lack as reality and life reflects it back. Living in the end, by contrast, bypasses the state of want and enters directly into the state of fulfillment. Instead of yearning for success, one imagines and feels the joy of already being successful. In doing so, the subconscious receives the impression that the desire is already true, and circumstances begin to align with that inner conviction. Think of an actor preparing for a role. The actor does not merely recite lines or imagine what the character might feel. The actor steps into the role so fully that for a time, the line between self and character dissolves. The emotions, movements, and thoughts of the character are lived as though real. This is what living in the end asks us to do, to assume the role of the person we desire to become, not as pretense but as an inner state of being. When the mind is saturated with that assumption, it eventually externalizes itself in lived reality. Living in the end is not about ignoring current circumstances, but about recognizing their impermanence. What exists outwardly today is the shadow of past assumptions. To dwell on them is to prolong them. To shift them, one must turn inward and persist in the feeling of the new reality. Suppose someone desires financial abundance. If they constantly dwell on bills, debt, and lack, they live in the end of poverty, and life reflects that state. But if they dwell inwardly in the feeling of security, freedom, and prosperity, if they imagine themselves already living in comfort, then abundance begins to express itself outwardly. The outer world eventually yields to the inner world that is consistently assumed. One of the most practical aspects of living in the end is its ability to quiet doubt. When a person constantly thinks about how their desire will be fulfilled, they inevitably encounter uncertainty. The how belongs to the unfolding of life, not to conscious effort. Living in the end bypasses this problem by focusing entirely on the result. Instead of worrying about steps, one dwells on the outcome as though it were present. This is the mental equivalent of planting a seed and trusting it to grow without digging it up each day to check. Examples of this principle can be seen in all areas of achievement. Athletes who mentally rehearse victory do not dwell on losing. They dwell on the exhilaration of winning. Innovators who bring forth new inventions often live so fully in the end result that they feel as if their vision already exists, even when the world doubts them. Leaders who transform societies act not from despair, but from the inner conviction that their vision is already real. In each case, the power lies not in wishing for the end, but in mentally and emotionally living in it. This principle also explains why daydreaming alone is insufficient. Casual fantasies often carry the feeling of someday, rather than now. They highlight distance rather than fulfillment. Living in the end is not idle wishing but deliberate assumption. It requires entering so deeply into the imagined state that it feels natural, as though life could not be otherwise. When the end feels natural, the subconscious accepts it and life reorganizes itself to match. There is also a subtle but important distinction between hoping and living in the end. Hope says, it might happen. Living in the end says, it has already happened. Hope postpones fulfillment into the indefinite future, while assumption draws fulfillment into the present state of consciousness. Since life reflects consciousness, what is assumed as present eventually becomes visible. Living in the end also brings emotional alignment. To dwell in the end is not just to think thoughts of success, but to feel the emotions that naturally accompany it. If one desires love, they must feel cherished, valued, and whole as though the relationship already exists. If one desires health, they must feel the vitality and energy of already being well. The emotions are not byproducts. They are the proof to the subconscious that the imagined state is true. Without feeling, the end remains a mental picture. With feeling, it becomes a living state of consciousness. What makes this principle powerful is its simplicity. Instead of battling circumstances, analyzing obstacles, or forcing outcomes, one simply assumes the position of having arrived. The mind ceases to ask, when will it happen? And instead rests in, it is happening now. This rest produces calmness, confidence, and clarity, which in turn influence decisions, behaviors, and opportunities. The outer world bends more easily to those who carry an inner certainty of success. To live in the end is to recognize that the present moment contains infinite possibilities, and the one we consistently dwell upon is the one that unfolds. The subconscious cannot resist a state that is consistently and emotionally assumed as true. By dwelling in the end of fulfilled desire, we cease being seekers and become possessors. We stop chasing success as something outside ourselves and begin embodying it within. From that embodiment, life mirrors back the very state we have chosen to inhabit. Revision shapes destiny. Every individual carries within them a storehouse of memories, a collection of past events that shape how they think, feel, and act in the present. For many, these memories become chains, binding them to patterns of fear, regret, or limitation. Yet, hidden within the mind lies an astonishing truth. The past does not have to be a fixed weight. We have the power to mentally rewrite past events, changing their influence on our present and future. This principle, known as revision, reveals that memory is not a static recording, but a living structure within consciousness, one that can be altered and, through alteration, redirect the entire course of destiny. To understand the power of revision, we must first recognize that what influences us about the past is not the event itself, but our interpretation of it. Two people may experience the same situation and carry away entirely different meanings. One sees failure, another sees growth. One sees rejection, another sees redirection. The difference lies in the inner story told about the event. If stories shape perception, then rewriting the story means rewriting the influence of the past. The act of revision does not deny that something occurred, rather, it reclaims the power to decide what that occurrence means for the present self. Imagine someone who, in their youth, was told they were not good enough. That memory, replayed over years, becomes a voice that whispers in moments of challenge, you cannot succeed. This voice is not the original event. It is the echo of interpretation. By revising the memory, one can change the voice. Instead of hearing rejection, the memory is reimagined as encouragement. Instead of feeling humiliation, the memory is recast as resilience. When this new version is accepted emotionally, the subconscious treats it as truth, and the influence of the old memory dissolves. The person begins to act not from woundedness but from strength, and their destiny shifts accordingly. Revision is possible because memory is not fixed. Neuroscience has discovered that each time we recall a memory, we are not playing back a permanent recording but actively reconstructing it. In that reconstruction, details can be modified, emotions can be reshaped, and new associations can be made. This scientific insight aligns with the deeper truth that memory is plastic, fluid, and subject to change. What the mind consistently revises, the subconscious eventually accepts, And what the subconscious accepts becomes the foundation of lived experience. The practice of revision can be as simple as closing the eyes, recalling a troubling memory, and replaying it differently. One might imagine hearing different words, receiving kindness instead of cruelty, or responding with courage instead of fear. The key is to feel the revised version as real. The subconscious does not distinguish between what physically happened and what is vividly felt in imagination. By dwelling repeatedly on the revised event, the old emotional charge dissolves and the new impression takes root. In time, the individual notices that their present reactions and decisions begin to reflect the revised past rather than the painful one. Consider the example of failure. Many people carry the sting of failed attempts as proof that they are incapable. Through revision, failure can be reimagined as a stepping stone, a necessary preparation that added strength and wisdom. By replaying the memory in this light, the subconscious adopts a new interpretation. I am capable, for I learned through this experience. As the old sense of inadequacy fades, confidence takes its place and new opportunities open. The past itself has not changed, but its meaning has, and meaning is what determines destiny. Revision also holds power in relationships. Words spoken in anger, moments of betrayal, or memories of misunderstanding can linger and poison the present. Through revision, these moments can be softened. One can imagine a different response, a kinder word, a more harmonious exchange. This is not about rewriting history for others, but about freeing oneself from the burden of bitterness. By changing the inner memory, forgiveness becomes easier, resentment loses its grip, and peace fills the space where pain once lived. This inner shift naturally reflects in outer interactions, often healing relationships or attracting more loving ones. Another profound use of revision is in self-concept. Many define themselves by past labels: the shy one, the failure, the rejected, the unlucky. These identities, rooted in memory, act as scripts that dictate present behavior. Through revision, these identities can be rewritten. One might reimagine moments of shyness as moments of quiet strength, or moments of rejection as redirections to something better. As the subconscious adopts the revised identity, the individual begins to act differently, speak differently, and attract different outcomes. Destiny shifts not by external chance, but by internal choice. It is important to see that revision does not deny the reality of pain. It does not pretend that hurtful events never occurred. Instead, it acknowledges that the true power of those events lies not in their happening, but in the meaning we give them. By revising the meaning, we reclaim authorship over our lives. This is why revision shapes destiny. The past is not an immovable wall, it is clay that can be molded. Each revision is a stroke of artistry, reshaping the sculpture of the self. When practiced consistently, revision becomes a way of life. Each day offers moments that may not unfold as desired. A harsh word, a mistake, a missed chance. Instead of carrying these forward, one can revise them at night before sleep, replaying the day as it ought to have been. By impressing the subconscious with the revised version, the influence of the day shifts, and tomorrow is approached with greater freedom. Over weeks and months, this practice accumulates, releasing the grip of the past and creating a new trajectory for the future. Revision is the reminder that nothing is final until we accept it as such. The past is not a prison, it is a canvas. By rewriting the pictures painted there, we alter the atmosphere of the present and the path of the future. In the silence of imagination, we hold the brush, and with each stroke of revision, we reshape the contours of destiny. Assumption creates experience. Human beings often believe that life is shaped by what they want. That desire alone determines the course of events. Yet a closer look reveals that countless desires remain unfulfilled while other outcomes, sometimes unwanted, persist. The reason is simple: life reflects not what we want, but what we assume to be real. Assumption creates experience. It is not the wish or the dream, but the inner conviction, the quiet acceptance that something is true, which imprints itself upon the subconscious and shapes the unfolding of events. An assumption is more than a passing thought. It is the lens through which reality is perceived. When someone assumes they are unlucky, they interpret every challenge as proof of misfortune and unconsciously gravitate toward confirming experiences. When someone assumes they are worthy of love, they carry themselves in ways that attract respect and affection. The world outside bends to the assumptions held within. Desire without assumption remains distant, but assumption, even without conscious desire, becomes lived reality. To grasp this fully, it is necessary to see that the subconscious mind operates through belief, not through logic. It does not respond to statements like, "I want success," if they are spoken without conviction. Instead, it responds to the underlying assumption, "I am successful," or "I am not," When the subconscious accepts an assumption as truth, it orchestrates thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and even circumstances to align with that truth. This is why two people with similar abilities and desires can experience vastly different outcomes. One assumes success and finds it, the other assumes failure and struggles. Consider the actor preparing for a role. They do not simply want to play the part, they assume the identity of the character. They think, feel, and act as though they are already the person they portray. On stage, the assumption becomes experience. In the same way, life itself is a stage upon which we play the roles we assume. If we assume wealth, we carry ourselves with the confidence and mindset of abundance. If we assume poverty, we unconsciously adopt the behaviors and attitudes that perpetuate lack. The assumption becomes the experience regardless of initial desire. This principle explains why so many find themselves repeating patterns. They want change but assume sameness. A person may want a loving relationship but secretly assume they are unworthy of love. Life then mirrors the assumption, not the desire, and they encounter rejection or neglect. Another may want financial freedom but assume money is always scarce. The assumption directs their choices and experiences, ensuring scarcity continues. In each case, it is not what is consciously wished for, but what is unconsciously assumed that governs the outcome. To use this principle deliberately, one must cultivate assumptions aligned with the desired outcome. This begins with imagination. By vividly imagining a scene that implies fulfillment, and by feeling the reality of that scene, the subconscious begins to accept it as true. The key is to persist in the assumption, to dwell in it until it feels natural. At first, the assumption may feel artificial, but repetition and feeling solidify it. Once accepted as natural, the assumption no longer requires effort. It becomes the default state of consciousness, and experience conforms to it. History offers examples of individuals who lived by assumption long before external evidence appeared. Inventors assumed solutions existed before they were discovered. Leaders assumed the possibility of change before it manifested. Artists assumed greatness within themselves before the world recognized their work. Their assumptions carried them beyond the limits of present circumstances. They did not merely want transformation, they assumed it, and life rose to meet that assumption. This principle also explains why negative assumptions can be so damaging. If someone assumes failure is inevitable, they unconsciously sabotage opportunities, hesitate in moments of decision, or interpret small setbacks as confirmation of defeat. The assumption becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Similarly, assuming illness, rejection, or limitation attracts experiences that confirm these beliefs. This is not punishment, but the natural law of consciousness. What is assumed inwardly is expressed outwardly. The great challenge then is awareness. Most assumptions are unconscious, formed through childhood experiences, social conditioning, or repeated self-talk. To change experience, one must first observe the assumptions that quietly govern it. Ask, what do I truly believe about myself, about life, about what is possible? Beneath the surface desires often lie assumptions that contradict them. The work is to replace these hidden assumptions with new ones, consistent with the desired reality. Assumption is not mere wishful thinking. It is not pretending or ignoring facts. Rather, it is choosing to accept a higher truth within consciousness, even when outward evidence has not yet conformed. A person assuming health does not deny illness but focuses inwardly on vitality. A person assuming success does not deny struggle but chooses to live inwardly in the end result of achievement. The assumption precedes the fact. Facts are shadows, temporary reflections of old assumptions. Change the assumption and the facts eventually follow. The practice of assumption also brings emotional alignment. To assume is not simply to think, but to feel as though the desired reality is already present. Thought without feeling is weak, but assumption clothed in emotion impresses deeply upon the subconscious. By imagining and feeling from the state of fulfillment, one collapses the gap between desire and reality. Life, in turn, reflects the assumption, often in ways that appear natural and inevitable. Ultimately, the law of assumption reveals that we are never victims of chance. Experience is not random but shaped by the inner states we accept as true. Desire alone is powerless without assumption, but assumption, whether conscious or unconscious, creates the framework through which life unfolds. By choosing assumptions deliberately, we step into authorship of experience. We cease living as passive observers and begin living as creators. Assumption is the seed, experience the harvest, and the field is always the mind, faith as inner certainty. Faith is often misunderstood as blind optimism, a kind of hopeful waiting for life to deliver something better. Yet true faith is not fragile hope or vague wishing. It is inner certainty, a conviction that transcends appearances and holds fast to the unseen. Faith is the deep knowing that what is invisible is nonetheless real, that what is not yet evident to the senses already exists in the realm of possibility, waiting to be clothed in form. True success arises not from chasing outward evidence, but from cultivating this inner certainty, this unwavering belief that the desired outcome is already secure. The senses tell us what appears to be real. They report circumstances, conditions, and limitations. But if life is only interpreted through the senses, one remains bound by what already is, unable to move beyond present appearances. Faith lifts the individual out of this prison by insisting that reality is more than what the senses can perceive. To believe only what can be seen is to accept the world as fixed. To believe in the unseen is to open the door to transformation. Every breakthrough, whether personal or collective, begins with faith. The inventor who brings forth a new machine must first believe in it, when there is no evidence it can exist. The leader who inspires change must hold certainty in a vision that others cannot yet see. The artist who creates something timeless begins with faith in an inner image before the canvas ever bears a mark. In each case, faith precedes fact, and fact eventually conforms to faith. Without inner certainty, no great accomplishment would come into being. Faith differs from ordinary desire in that desire looks outward for confirmation, while faith rests inwardly in conviction. A person may desire health, wealth, or success, but if they constantly search for signs, doubt soon undermines the desire. Faith, on the other hand, does not waver at the absence of proof. It does not need outward confirmation, for it has already accepted the unseen as real. This acceptance impresses itself upon the subconscious, and from this impression springs the outer manifestation. Faith also operates as a stabilizing force. Life often presents contradictions to our inner vision. The one who desires success may encounter setbacks. The one who desires love may face rejection. Without faith, these experiences appear as proof of impossibility, and the individual surrenders the vision. With faith, setbacks are not final, they are passing shadows. Faith holds steady in the conviction that the unseen truth is greater than temporary appearances. It sustains persistence until reality bends to match the inner certainty. To cultivate faith is to train the mind to dwell more in imagination than in the evidence of the senses. This is not denial of reality, but recognition that reality has layers. The outer layer is the visible fact, the inner layer is the unseen cause. Faith works in the inner layer. By assuming and believing in the unseen cause, one allows the outer layer to shift. Just as a seed is invisible beneath the soil yet certain to grow, so too is the unseen reality certain to manifest when faith is maintained. Examples of this principle appear in every life, even in small ways. Consider the student who approaches an exam with faith in their preparation. Their confidence allows them to recall knowledge and perform calmly, leading to success. Contrast this with the student filled with doubt. Anxiety clouds memory, and failure becomes more likely. The difference lies not in ability, but in faith. Or consider the entrepreneur who moves forward with faith in their vision. Their certainty attracts support, inspires action, and carries them through obstacles. Without faith, hesitation and fear stall progress. Faith, therefore, is the inner force that determines the outcome even before events unfold. Faith is also deeply connected to feeling. It is not enough to say, "I believe." Faith must be felt as a living reality, a sense of inner assurance that needs no justification. This feeling of certainty is what convinces the subconscious. Words without feeling are empty, but words backed by the feeling of conviction impress deeply. The subconscious, once impressed, arranges life to reflect that certainty. Thus, faith is not passive waiting, but active creation, for it is the feeling of fulfilled reality embraced in the present. One of the greatest challenges in living by faith is persistence. The senses often contradict the inner vision. Time delays can tempt doubt to creep in. Faith requires consistency in the face of delay, holding the end as certain regardless of appearances. Just as a farmer does not abandon the field because the seed is not visible, so too must one with faith trust the unseen process. This persistence is what transforms faith from shallow hope into unshakable certainty. Faith is not dependent on external validation because it is rooted in inner authority. It says, "I know it is so," even when the world says otherwise. This knowing is not arrogance but alignment with the creative principle of life. When one carries such certainty, the mind, body, and environment align with it. Actions are taken with confidence, decisions flow with clarity, and opportunities appear naturally. Success is not forced, it is drawn by the magnetic power of inner belief. Faith as inner certainty also liberates from fear. Fear is faith inverted, it is belief in an unseen negative outcome. Just as faith in success creates success, fear of failure often brings failure. Both operate on the same principle. The unseen accepted as real becomes visible. The choice lies in where to place faith in possibility or in limitation, in life or in loss. By choosing faith in the desired outcome, one redirects the creative power of belief toward fulfillment rather than defeat. Faith is the anchor that steadies the mind, the fuel that drives persistence, and the bridge that connects imagination to manifestation. It does not demand evidence, for it knows evidence follows conviction. To cultivate such faith is to step beyond appearances, to dwell in certainty when the senses whisper doubt, and to live as though the unseen were already present. In this way, faith becomes the hidden engine of success, the inner certainty that calls forth the invisible into form. Finally, success rests on faith, not blind faith, but the deep inner certainty that what is unseen is already real. Faith is imagination clothed in conviction. It does not waver at appearances, for it knows appearances are only shadows cast by our deeper beliefs. So I leave you with this: success is not a matter of chance or circumstance. It is a language, a dialogue between your imagination and your reality. Learn to speak it fluently, and you will discover that the power to create, to achieve, and to rise higher has always been within you. Thank you.